Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Every entrepreneur knows that having a good idea is only the beginning of the process. To be successful, you need to take that idea to market. And this involves production, which involves people, organization, and years of hard effort. At times, the loneliness of the innovator can be so intense that we want to stop innovating altogether. And yet, innovation, novelty, beginning new things is part and parcel of the call to evangelize. How does Christian grace sanctify the innovator's solitude? Hey everybody, great to be back with you again. We've got an exciting class here. It's the second in our series on embracing solitude. And I'm excited about it because when you if you listen to anyone who is a leader, they're going to tell you that it's lonely at the top. And that phrase, of course, it goes way back. It's an ancient tradition, and even the Chinese, from time immemorial, have had this saying. They said that at the top of the mountain, it's always lonely, and in fact, it's true. Anytime you go up and where you're the first to do anything, where you're the leader of an idea, of a movement, of a change, well, you have to bear the burden that the people behind you might not have the same vision that you have. Actually, they seldom do. And if not only the same vision, but the same passion that you have. It's something that was been repeated to me many times by my own mentors as I've endeavored to do this work of founding the St. John Institute, where they said, Father Nathan, remember, no one will ever care about this as much as you do. And that was hard for me to understand. Because how could you not care about this even more than I do? And yet the idea is that when you have a vision, when you're doing something no one has done before, you have to brave it alone. And people will say, oh, no, you don't have to be alone. You're not alone, etc. But the fact is, if you're the CEO of a company, if you're the head of an organization, if you're the owner of a business, you have to carry pressures and expectations that no one else is capable of carrying because they don't have the same responsibility that you do. When you initiate change, you're responsible for the effects that come from your change. When you're a leader and you make an impact and make a splash, you're the one who's responsible for where the water goes. And so you need to carry that, and carrying that is something that you alone can do. I was speaking the other day with a very successful CEO, and he was telling the story of a mentoring relationship that he had with some students. And he had told them, listen, it's very lonely at the top when you're running a company. And the students didn't believe him. They said, no, if you're the CEO, you're making a lot of money. You're extremely, successful. You can do anything you want. You have power. They have all these kind of stereotypes that most people have when it comes to successful business people. And so this fellow said this analogy, which I thought was just brilliant. He told them, well, listen, imagine this. Imagine that it's 2:00 in the morning and you have the most important exam in your life to take at 7 a.m. the next morning. And you realize that you have not studied. You've not done the work that you needed to do. You blew it off. You were messing around with your friends. And now at 2:00 in the morning, you open the books to try to cram for this extremely important test. And not only is your grade point average on the line, but your scholarship depends on your grade point average, and your career depends on your scholarship. You've got to nail this test, or your grade point average will drop to the point where you will lose your scholarship and not be able to follow the career path that you set out for yourself. And you're sitting at your desk. Now, who can you call or text to ask to take that test for you? And of course, the students were looking around. They were like, well, nobody, right? He's like, who is going to take that burden off of your shoulders? And the answer, well, nobody. You're really under the gun. He said, yes, that's the pressure that a CEO feels. No one else can bear the burden of looking down the road and figuring out what to do with this company and all the jobs and all the people whose lives depend upon those jobs, but you. I remember listening to another CEO who was telling me the story of the time that they were up all night in the middle of the night in order to make this business plan, and they knew that the lives of some 75 people depended on the decisions that they were going to make that next day. And so they spent the entire night, and this person listening to them, it's very touching because you hear the anxiety, you hear the pain, and the difficulty that these good people embrace by embracing their role as a leader. And we know many people aren't that way. Many people don't have that kind of heart, but a Christian does. And a Christian leader who's at the top embraces, when they do that type of responsibility, they also embrace with it the solitude that comes as part and parcel of that job. It's something that we don't always appreciate enough. And I'm speaking about CEOs, I'm speaking about business owners, well, in part because few people ever do. It's just kind of like an overlooked sector of our society. And I kind of would like to be a priest that reaches out to those good people and says, thank you. Thank you for running your dental office. Thank you for being chiropractors. Thank you for working over, time in order to start a new endeavor, right? But we can apply this all across the board in leadership. When a mother decides to homeschool the child, she shares that burden with the father. And yet the two of them, other than those two parents, who else can shoulder that burden? Answer, nobody. Right? This is the loneliness of leadership. What if it wasn't the right decision? What if we should have done the other thing? No one will know. And of course, the other examples abound. From those who choose to write a book, from those who choose to, anytime you make a decision, you're at the forefront of change. And being in that position puts you in a position of solitude. Now, I like to think that since there are 5 different stages of the action any leader engages in, there's also 5 particular forms of solitude. 5 moments in our actions and the arc of all of our actions where we have to accept that we're going to be alone. And of course, the beautiful thing as a Christian is that we're never alone. That in fact, those moments of solitude for a Christian leader become moments where we can encounter Christ and encounter our God. We're never completely alone. In fact, at the moments where we're at our best, and we're initiating new things, changes, opportunities, and decisions that have come our way, well, those moments where we're at our best, we're also the closest to the Creator. We're the closest to the King of Kings, the leader of leaders, because he lived that solitude the best. No one led better than Christ. And so no one was at the forefront of change and making a difference and influencing the world more profoundly than Jesus. And this means that all those moments where we experience the solitude of leadership are actually moments where we can experience union with Christ. And this is very important because remember, the goal of a Christian is to become a saint. If your leadership is not making you a saint, then you're doing something wrong. Right? The leadership itself is faulty. You're not leading in the right way. Your leadership should make you holy, and your holiness should make you a leader. The two go side by side. When you have people on the one hand that say, oh no, because I'm praying and I'm in spirituality, I'm not even concerned about the world, you're not looking at a real Christian example of prayer. The Christian people who pray are extremely concerned about the world. That's what drives them into their union with God. The deeper their union with God, the more love that they have for the people and the actions of this world. And on the contrary, those who are engaged in the world absolutely need God. The more that you engage in truth, this world, the more that you realize that you need him. Because when you engage the world as a leader and you're making decisions and you're launching things that are risky and you're engaging in toilsome activity that's difficult and that's wearisome, where you've taken the burden of saying, I am responsible for what is about to happen, you're engaging in an activity that puts you very close to God. And if you bring faith into it, you can make that difference, make that change in an even better way than you could on your own. You could become God's instrument as he sanctifies the world through you. And that's the whole vision.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So remember, when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about action, right? And if you take a look at what St. Thomas Aquinas writes about what an action is, you can kind of distill it down to saying that there's 5 different stages of an action. You have to know what you want to do. Then you have to know the best way to do it, or the way that you're going to do it. Then you have to start the action. That's number 3, third stage. The 4th stage is you have to finish what you started. And the 5th stage is you have to share it with other people. You have to bring other people into it. You need to give what you've done to other people effectively, right? These 5 kind of realms of the human act are a wonderful way for us to dissect, well, what's happening to us as a leader. And so today I want to focus with you in on the very first aspect of leadership, which is vision. Knowing what we want to do. Having an idea for something that perhaps is new. Now, it doesn't always have to be new, of course. Like, there are very few new things. I mean, humanity's been around a very long time, and yet it can be relatively new. New to our social settings, new to who we are, new to our own experience, and new to the people that we're trying to influence with this idea, right? This is a real, one of the crosses of a leader, especially if you're a visionary kind. Now, there's a lot of different types of leaders, a lot of different types of people who influence the world, and not all of them are visionary. I mean, thanks be to God for that, right? Because if everyone was visionary, it'd be very hard to control and run things. But when you look in the life of the church, there were some saints who really typified this ability to see what was not yet, and as if it already existed. Right? St. Paul even talks about this in the letter to the Hebrews, where he says that he proceeded forth as one who sees the invisible. That was Abraham. Abraham walked as one who saw the invisible. And a visionary leader has that capacity. They have ideas, but their ideas are more than just ideas. They're passions. They're things that they can see and almost touch if only we would do the effort necessary in order to achieve them. Well, that's the whole thing, you see, because then people look and they say, I don't really know if I should expend the energy and make the effort to achieve something that I don't see or really understand. And so the person with that vision, with that idea, is then left to explain to people the idea that they have and the vision and why it's so great, and to try to impart to them the passion that drives the visionary themselves. This is a very tall order. Especially if you start to explain your vision and it's met with criticism or doubt or skepticism, which is most of the time, because most people are not looking for change. And someone who's a visionary is literally walking around like a catalyst of change. Everything that they're going to touch or see, they can see better, different, new, because they can see as if it were the invisible. And so that puts them in a spot of isolation, which is a very difficult place, because on the one hand, they're pressured in from the inside to make happen what they know could happen, to bring the change about that's necessary in order to achieve this good that they can almost taste, even though it doesn't yet exist. You see, and the more passionate they are for their vision, the more compelling they are for those around them. But also the deeper the inner crucifixion becomes when they're met with misunderstanding or reluctancy from those who are around them, because those around them don't necessarily see the value. And then the other pressure that they have is that not only do they, on the one hand, see what they want and have this vision to bring it forth, but then their other pressure is that those who don't want to move, they have to pull them along. They have to inspire them. And so there's a lot of inner tension that the visionary leader has to accept. The inner tension of not being understood for the great idea that they have within them. And on the one hand, socially, people like to laugh about these people. They call them the idea guy, right? The idea guy's always got an idea. You ought to do this. You ought to do this. And I agree, that can be rather annoying to be around an idea guy, because nothing stays the same, right? And so we kind of like to poke fun at those folks. But on the other hand, could you imagine life without the idea guy? I mean, if you don't have ideas, you don't have change. And if you don't change, well, you're liable to be stifled in many different ways in your culture. Your culture in your business, and your culture in your family. It's as difficult as it is, and especially because you have other types of leaders who are extremely good at managing details or at creating and executing plans. And for them, having these new ideas, it can be disturbing because they already have an old idea that they're executing, right? And it's almost like, why do we need to change? And it puts us into a place that's very unique of inner solitude. And I want to speak to you about that because, yes, you can overdo it. Yes, I'm not saying ideas for the sake of ideas are a good thing, right? Like you have to temper this. The idea guy needs to also calm down a little bit, right? Because ideas have consequences and we have limited resources of time, talent, and treasure. And we can't just follow every great idea just because it's a great idea. You have to make choices. And that's the next phase of the leader. But I want to speak just to a moment about how this innovation, the innovator who's behind innovation is actually a Christian figure. Now, here's what I mean. All right, if you're at the beginning of change by desiring something that is not yet there, of course, there's a deep parallelism here with what it means to be a Christian, because a Christian lives for heaven even though they're not there yet. And we believe and proclaim a lot of aspects of our faith which are not yet here in their fullness. We believe in a consummation that's going to happen in heaven and at the end of time that we do not yet see or feel. And so in many ways, when we live as a Christian, we're called to be visionary and to have the audacity to stand in front of a world that demands proof, that demands plans, and that demands results, and offer them faith. Offer them the faith that we have in Jesus Christ, in his word and his promise, and what he did for us on the cross. And we recognize that solitude, therefore, the Christian vision for the world leads the world, because Christ made us as his church in order to bring to everyone else the great graces that he won for us on the cross. And this means we know something that they don't yet know. And we're asking them to expend their energy and dedicate their limited resources of their time, talent, and treasure to obtain something that they don't yet have. You see, when we follow Jesus and we believe in his word, we're given a knowledge of something so wonderful, so beautiful, so true, and so holy that we want to tell the whole world about it. And in fact, we're supposed to tell the whole world about it. The only thing is, it hasn't yet come in its fullness. And so we find ourselves in this prophetic situation, like an innovator, like an inventor of new things, like a leader who's trying to inspire change, of being between these two pressures. The pressure from the inside of the desire that we have for the God that we know, and the pressure from the outside of trying to bring people who don't want to change into the change that they don't want. And in the middle between the two is the solitary position of the Christian leader. And I want to talk to you about how holy and special that spot is and how close Christ is to us when we embrace it.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
Anytime we choose to act, we choose to engage something that has not yet been. We are moving change. We're changing the situation that we currently have. In any way, we have status A to status B. Right? And as we do that, we who are leading that change, whatever it is, well, it starts from within us, from the idea that we have. We somehow or other sense that there is a good that can be. And if only we change the way the present is, the future could be better, right? And it can be in very small ways. It can be in very humble ways. And it can also be in very big ways. But anytime that we innovate, that's what we're doing. There's something that we've seen and grasped as a possible, and that is we deem as being worthy of our effort. And so we try to and bring other people around us to follow us in that change. So to do that, something has to happen inside of us. We need to embrace a possible thing as if it was actually doable and realizable. And the more that you feel that you can achieve something, well, the deeper your dedication is to making it happen. Right? But that process is something that has to be replicated with others. And oftentimes people drag their feet. It's almost like the question of a chicken and the egg. Everyone will believe it's possible once you've done it. But in order to do it, you need people to believe it's possible. Right? So you go out looking for your investors, you look for your angel donors, you look for your first volunteers, you look for anybody who's willing to bet and believe in the dream that you have. I remember one time speaking with a fellow who did a lot of screening for entrepreneurs. And they said that the screening had very little to do with the idea. They didn't really care so much about your business plan and what you had behind all your thinking. They wanted to know you. They said that if they could get to know and find a person who wouldn't quit and who was passionate enough to sacrifice for what they had inside, that they'd be willing to invest their money behind the idea. Because the idea itself is going to change. Any entrepreneur knows that. But the person leading it needs to be willing to be committed to it with that degree of tenacity to make it happen. And you could say the same thing about any time you have a team. So if you're leading in an organization and you're saying to yourself, well, gosh, I need to make this change. Well, the very first thing you need to do is get a team of people to get as close as you are to the project and to try to want it nearly as much as you do. This is our first thing. And the more people can become tenacious around what's possible because they've caught that vision and they see that they want what can be, well, the more likely you are to succeed. Now, I just want to point out a few spots here where this becomes a very Christian thing and where Christianity speaks a lot to this type of cross, right? Number one, the most visionary person of all time was our Lord Jesus Christ. I mean, when you talk about having a vision or seeing the invisible, being the Son of God is obviously, you can't even imagine how profoundly he lived that solitude of the visionary, because we still have not yet fully understood all that he came to bring and to teach us, nor have we entered into the glory that he's described for us as the purpose for his coming, right? So this is a great example of how Jesus himself did not run away from that cross. He embraced being the visionary. He embraced being the leader. He embraced having an idea that other people didn't understand, still don't understand, and he did it for the sake of his followers. Right? This does not mean that all of the times that we find ourselves in solitude, the solitude of an idea or the solitude of innovation is good, right? Sometimes we are out of touch. Sometimes we need to get back to reality, etc. But at the same time, isn't it neat to think that our Lord himself embraced this position of being at the forefront of a change with his followers not fully understanding or fully buying into the change that he came to make. And he didn't run away from it. Instead, he sanctified it. He filled it. And in a sense, it's to say to all of us who are in leadership that you're never alone. Jesus himself, first and to a greater degree than any of us, is there. And he understands what this position is like. And he's there to support you. Don't run away from the cross of being a visionary leader, even if it puts you in solitude with respect to others or makes you feel extremely uncomfortable, because our Lord himself is in that place first. You look at, for example, the ways that he was with his disciples. There was times where his disciples literally didn't understand what he was doing or why he was doing it. And Jesus bore with it patiently. He was rejected by the people of his time. He was not understood for what he was trying to do, and yet he fulfilled the Father's will. He kept his eyes on God and the Father, and he surrendered his pathway to the Father. And we are called to do the same. But he's not the only one, of course. There's saints who can also inspire us. When St. Junipero Serra was sent to California, for example, the church didn't exist there. Sure, there were the indigenous people of his day. They were there. But like, how do you come up with linking a series of mission churches up and down the coast of California, right? Whoever would have thought that? And yet one at a time, one step at a time, being led by the Holy Spirit, Junipero Serra linked these missions into a place that gave the Catholic Church a foothold and allowed these people of his day to be baptized. And now we look back at it and we see all these cities that have come from the mission churches and all the ways that the church has grown. And we say, oh, this totally makes sense. Of course, now there are cities where once there were missions, and where once there were non-Christians, now there are baptized Christians. And the church continues to grow and flourish where this visionary went by himself. And of course, there was opposition. And of course, there were people that didn't understand. And of course, he had to fight consistently for this idea that he could plant these missions there where people thought they couldn't be planted before. And there's so many stories of the saints that are the same way. I think in the end, we have to accept there's always going to be the solitude of those who go first. It's always more comfortable to follow in the footsteps of a leader where you can see where they've trod and then build on it. But the first person who dares something great for Christ oftentimes has to embrace the fact that they dare it alone, that their idea stays inside of them until it can be seen and measured, touched and tasted, and that they're with the Lord, with the saints who have gone before them, and you accept that pioneering cold and harshness for the sake of the beauty of what you're going to leave behind. My friends, don't stop leading. Don't stop trying. Don't stop building, even if you find that you're all by yourself, because you're never alone. As it says in the letter to the Hebrews, we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, the inspiration and the pioneer of our faith. For he goes before us, taking us to new places, leading us on.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.